Learnin with Ronpon.
Well, hello there. Welcome to take 2 of Learnin with Ronpon. I'm Ronpon. As you can tell from the words I'm saying and maybe the tone of my voice, I've been talking for about 15 minutes or so. And then I realized I wasn't recording on Audacity. So I'm going to start over. This is going to be a little podcast where I just talk about random facts and expand on some of them. I listen to a lot of stuff in the background, and I feel like I've been such a consumer and that I want to contribute, but also the things that I've been watching more recently have been a little more anxiety-inducing. A lot more kind of debates and arguments and like stupid culture war nonsense. So I figure I'll focus on something a little more interesting, a little more useful, a little less angry. So I'm going to do this. Yeah, as I said, this is called Learnin with Ronpon. I'll be using ChatGPT to learn. I think something to note about ChatGPT, though, is that every once in a while it hallucinates, where it just creates something out of thin air. It doesn't really know when it doesn't know something, so sometimes it just makes something up. However, with GPT-4, I've found this to be much less of an issue, especially when it's just information like this, and especially when it's open-ended. So I don't expect that'll be much of an issue, but if you notice that I say anything wrong, please go to the YouTube channel, look up Ronpon on YouTube, find the video and comment it. Really appreciate it because I want this to be as correct as possible, and I want people to see the truth. All right, so let's hop on in. From physics. Neutron stars are so dense that a teaspoonful would weigh about 10 billion tons. Wow. Biology. Octopuses have 3 hearts. 2 pump blood to the gills, while the third pumps it to the rest of the body. And I was curious about that, so I looked it up for more of an explanation. Octopuses have a complex circulatory system adapted to their unique needs. 2 of the hearts, known as bronchial hearts or gill hearts, I don't know if it's bronchial, might be branchial, I'll just say gill hearts, are responsible for pumping blood to the octopus's gills where it gets oxygenated. Each gill heart is associated with 1 gill. Octopuses have 2 gills, and they cease to beat when the octopus is swimming, which explains why octopuses prefer to crawl rather than swim. The third heart, known as the systemic heart, pumps the oxygenated blood from the gills to the rest of the body. Unlike the gill hearts, the systemic heart is muscular and has several roles similar to a human heart, maintaining the circulation of blood to all the body's tissues and organs. However, interestingly, this heart also stops beating when the octopus is swimming, leading to the octopus becoming quickly tired when swimming. That's really cool. I always knew that they crawled a lot, but I didn't know why. Octopus blood is based on copper rather than iron like in mammals, which is why it's blue rather than red. This copper-based blood, known as hemocyanin, is less efficient at transporting oxygen than iron-based hemoglobin, but it functions better in cold, low-oxygen environments like the deep sea where many octopuses live. Music. The world's longest concert, organized by the John Cage Trust, started in 2001 and is set to end in 2640. It's a long one. History. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than she did to the building of the Great Pyramid. I actually knew this one already, but bonkers. Cleopatra was 69 to 30 BCE. It sounds a little backwards because you count backwards when it's BCE. And the moon landing was 1969 CE. The pyramids, 2560 BCE. So not only was she closer to the moon landing, but she was closer by hundreds of years. Wow. Astronomy. Venus is the only planet in our solar system that rotates clockwise. Let's find out more. Venus rotates in a direction opposite to its orbit around the Sun, a phenomenon called retrograde rotation. While most planets, including Earth, rotate prograde or counterclockwise when viewed from above the North Pole, Venus and Uranus rotate retrograde or clockwise. Yeah, I'm calling it Uranus because apparently that's correct. If you want me to say Uranus, I will say it. Uranus. Your anus. That's all you get. Did you know that Uranus is blue? Scientists, a kid said that to me when I was, I think, grade 4 or 5, and I found it to be the funniest thing anyone had ever said. Scientists aren't entirely sure why Venus rotates in the opposite direction. One popular theory is that Venus initially spun in the same direction as most other planets, and over billions of years, gravitational interactions with other celestial bodies, particularly the Sun and the Earth, caused its rotation to slow and eventually reverse. Another theory suggests that Venus might have undergone a catastrophic collision with a very large body, like a comet or asteroid, early in its history that caused the planet to start spinning in the opposite direction. It's also possible that Venus originally spun counterclockwise, but slowly over billions of years, its dense atmosphere and the Sun's gravitational influence caused a tidal locking effect that gradually slowed its rotation. Eventually, it might have stopped and then started rotating in the opposite direction. Now, you may have noticed that it refers to both Venus and Uranus having retrograde rotation. But earlier, it said it was just Venus that spun opposite. So I asked it, what gives? And it responded, essentially, that it didn't give me enough info. Apparently, both Venus and Uranus have a retrograde rotation, which means they spin in the direction opposite to their orbit around the Sun. However, their rotations are different in another important aspect. Uranus is tilted on its side by about 98 degrees, while Venus is not. When you consider the tilt, Venus's rotation is almost completely opposite to its orbit. It's upside down relative to its orbit, while Uranus's rotation is more like rolling along its orbit. So it's not necessarily opposite so much as perpendicular, kinda. So that's why they say that Venus is the only one that actually rotates opposite, because it's opposite while looking at it from the North Pole, while Uranus, because of the tilt, looks like it's rotating on its side. From art, the Mona Lisa has no visible eyebrows or eyelashes. It's believed Leonardo da Vinci either deliberately left them out, or they have since faded. Technology. As of 2021, the world's largest data center, the Kolos Data Center, is located in Ballingen, Norway, and it's almost the size of 6 football fields. That's not that interesting. Literature. The entire Harry Potter series contains 1,084,170 words. And I read them all, many, many times as a kid. Environment. Trees can send distress signals about drought and disease to other trees via a network of fungus. Although I've heard there's... You know what? Let's look into it. Can you go into the controversy around the whole tree fungus communication thing? Let's see what it has to say. Because I remember hearing that the whole tree fungus thing was, if not debunked, at least questioned. The idea of trees communicating via a network of underground fungi, often called the wide wood web, is a fascinating and relatively new concept in biology. It's been seen as revolutionary, but like any groundbreaking idea, it's not without its skeptics and controversies. So what is it? Many trees have a mutualistic relationship with a type of fungi known as mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi? These fungi live... Fungi? I don't know. I'm looking it up. Fungi. Where did I go? These fungi live in and around the roots of the tree. The tree provides the fungi with sugars it produces through photosynthesis, and in return, the fungi help the tree absorb water and essential nutrients from the soil. But the fungi do something else as well. They create vast networks connecting the roots of different trees like a subterranean internet. Through these networks, trees can share resources and send signals to each other. The controversy. The main controversy is around just how much communication and resource sharing is happening in these networks. Some researchers believe that trees use this system to support each other, sending nutrients to neighbors in need and warning each other about pests or diseases. However, not everyone is fully on board with this idea. Some scientists argue that these networks might not be about communication in the way we understand it, and the transfer of nutrients might not be as altruistic as it seems. It could be more about competition for resources, where stronger, larger trees are dominating the network and gaining more from it than they give back. Then there are others who caution that while the networks do exist, we need more concrete evidence to understand the extent of their use for communication or resource sharing. They stress that it's important not to overstate the findings or anthropomorphize trees by assigning them human attributes like altruism or intent. That's kind of obvious. That actually didn't That didn't help too much, but it helped a little. Hey, just popping in here to say that I wrote a book. Check out Ronpon's Nursery Rhymes for Sarcastic A-Holes on Amazon. It's just a bunch of nursery rhymes with, ideally, comical endings. But you can be the judge if they are in fact comical. Let's talk about food. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible. Although it spends 2 weeks in my friggin' cupboard and it becomes rock hard. Geography. Africa is the only continent to stretch from the northern temperate zone to the southern temperate zone. Wicked. Chemistry. A single gram of DNA can store about 215 petabytes or 215 million gigabytes of data. I mean, I suspect there's a little more to it than that. What about this? Yeah, it just says there's no technology to actually achieve this practically, so whatever. Mathematics. The number pi, 3.14159, blah, 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 is so long and non-repeating that it's possible the entire works of Shakespeare could be found within its digits. I don't know what that means. How do you get Shakespeare from numbers? How do you... Oh, okay. That's what I assumed. So it's just saying, if you assigned a letter, like A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc., there would be such an arrangement of numbers that they would spell out the works of Shakespeare. That's cool. Animal kingdom. I knew this one too. The mantis shrimp can throw the fastest punch of any animal at speeds of up to 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers an hour. Economy. As of 2021, the most expensive painting ever sold is Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, sold for $450.3 million in 2017. It's a lot of dough. Philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche once bought a horse being whipped in the street and embraced it, marking the beginning of his descent into madness. I don't really understand how that's a descent into madness. That sounds like an ascent from madness. Stop whipping horses in the streets, people. I don't know. Does it explain any more? Oh, that's interesting. So it did correct itself, kind of. It said, actually, this event marked the culmination of his mental health decline rather than the beginning. So he just had like an actual breakdown when he saw it, which I could see. If you have a total breakdown because you see a horse being whipped, especially if it's something you've been seeing all your life, it's indicative of something. Sport. Basketball was invented by a Canadian physical education teacher, James Naismith, as a less injury-prone sport than football. I did a project on him in school. No, wait, it was a speech. I remember the intro ended with like, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the sport I'm talking about is basketball. 4-3, he's at the 3-point line, 2 seconds, he shoots. Yeah, I liked basketball. When I was a kid, I was just sorry for the tangent. When I was a kid, I was told I could be between like 5'8" and 6'4". Ended up being 6 foot, so right in the middle. But all I heard was 6'4", and I was like, I'm going to be a basketball player, because it was the one sport I was good at the time. I did not become a basketball player. I lacked the height and also the drive. But I like it. Anyway. Health. This is really neat. The human body has enough iron in it to forge a metal nail that is 3 inches long. That's really cool. Engineering. The Great Wall of China is not visible from space with the naked eye. It's a common myth busted by astronauts. All right. Now, let's talk about the invention of the telephone and the controversy around it that I was not aware of. The invention. The history of the telephone dates back to the 1830s, when Michael Faraday started researching the possibility of converting electrical energy into mechanical energy. The idea of transmitting sounds over long distances gained traction in the 1860s when Johann Philipp Reis demonstrated a device that could transmit musical notes. The story of the telephone, as we know it today, begins in the 1870s with 2 main characters, Alexander Graham Bell, who we all knew, and Elisha Gray. That's spelled Elisha like Alicia Cuthbert, but it's an old dude, not a hot young babe. Both were working independently on devices to transmit speech electrically. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Scotland in 1847 and moved to the US in 1871. Whoa, he was Scottish! Like he would have sounded Scottish. That's awesome. I didn't know that. Bell's mother and wife were both deaf, which led him to investigate hearing and speech. He taught music and speech to the deaf and started experimenting with ways to transmit speech over wires. Elisha Gray, on the other hand, was an American electrical engineer who co-founded the Western Electric Manufacturing Company. Gray was working on a device that could transmit speech electrically, very much like Bell. The dispute. The controversy revolves around the events of February 14, 1876. On that day, both Bell and Gray rushed to the patent office to secure their rights to the invention of the telephone. Bell's lawyer, Marcellus Bailey, arrived at the patent office first and submitted Bell's patent application. Elisha Gray's lawyer arrived later that same day with a document called a caveat, a statement of concept for an invention without the necessity of detailed plans for Gray's version of the telephone. Bell's patent was granted on March 7, 1876, and he began working on his device immediately. Gray challenged Bell's patent, arguing that he had been using liquid in his transmitter design, an element that Bell had added to his design after visiting the patent office and allegedly seeing Gray's caveat. Years of legal disputes followed, with over 600 lawsuits filed over the patent rights to the telephone, 5 of which reached the U.S. Supreme Court. Ultimately, the Supreme Court upheld Bell's patent rights, citing lack of evidence to support the claims of fraud and collusion. I don't know. Sorry, Gray. Bye, Elisha. How the telephone worked. Bell's telephone was quite simple. It consisted of a transmitter, where the speaker's voice would cause a diaphragm to vibrate, and a receiver where these vibrations would be converted back into sound. The transmitter included a thin metal diaphragm attached to a needle, which was positioned in a water-based acid solution. Speaking into the transmitter would cause the diaphragm to vibrate, causing the needle to move in the acid solution. This changed the electrical resistance in the solution, which was connected to a battery. The changes in resistance would cause corresponding changes in the electrical current flowing in the circuit. The receiver included a similar diaphragm, this time attached to an electromagnet. The changing electrical current from the transmitter would energize the electromagnet, causing the diaphragm in the receiver to vibrate in the same patterns as the one in the transmitter. These vibrations would generate sound waves in the air, recreating the original speech. This was a brilliant system at the time, but it had its limitations. For example, the liquid transmitter was messy and impractical. Bell and his team soon replaced it with a more practical design using a variable resistance carbon microphone, which became the standard for telephones for over a century. All right, but that was interesting. I hope that was interesting for you too. Now, today in history. This is being recorded on July 7th. I suspect it won't be uploaded today. But it might. Who knows? We'll see if I can stay on task. So let's do 10 significant events that happened today, July 7th, throughout history. In 1456, nearly 25 years after her execution, the Catholic Church declared Joan of Arc innocent of the charges against her. A bit too late. This famous French heroine was tried and executed for heresy in 1431, but the trial was later found to be politically motivated, leading to her exoneration. Do you think? 1520. Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés was defeated by the Aztecs at the Battle of Otumba during the Spanish conquest of Mexico. Despite the loss, Cortés was able to use the battle to negotiate a peace treaty with the Aztec Empire, setting the stage for its eventual conquest. I have trouble with names because I'm never sure how hard I should work on pronouncing them. I feel like an ass saying Hernán Cortés when the rest sounds like a Canadian schmuck, but I also feel like an ass when I say Hernán Cortés, or worse, Hernán Cortés. So I'm just going to do my best to pronounce them pretty correctly. 1863. The first day of the draft lottery during the American Civil War occurred in New York City. This event was one of the major triggers of the New York City draft riots, obviously it's in the name, which occurred a few days later and were among the worst instances of civil unrest in American history. July 7th, 1898. The United States formally annexed Hawaii. The U.S. had long had a substantial presence in the Hawaiian Islands due to the sugar trade, but it wasn't until this day that Hawaii officially became U.S. territory. July 7th, 1928. Sliced bread was sold for the first time by the Chillicothe Baking Company of Chillicothe, Missouri. If it's Missouri, it's probably like Chillicothe. The Chillicothe Baking Company of Chillicothe, Missouri. It was described as the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped, giving rise to the famous phrase, the best thing since sliced bread. July 7th, 1937. The second, is it Sino or Sino? I've read it so many times, I'm not sure. Let's look it up. Translate says Sino. Let's say Sino. The Second Sino-Japanese War began with the Marco Polo Bridge incident. This war, lasting until 1945, was the largest Asian war in the 20th century and significantly influenced the course of World War II. Let's learn more about that. The Marco Polo Bridge incident, also known as the Lugu Bridge incident, was a significant event that marked the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, which would last until 1945, when something else happened. The Marco Polo Bridge, also known as the Lugu Bridge, is an important historic stone bridge located southwest of Beijing, China. The incident was named after Marco Polo because he mentioned this bridge in his writings. In the years leading up to the Marco Polo Bridge incident, the Empire of Japan had been expanding its control over Manchuria following the Mukden incident in 1931, leading to tension with the Republic of China. This region, rebranded as Manchukuo, was recognized as an independent nation but was under Japanese control. The incident. On the night of July 7th, 1937, a small contingent of Japanese soldiers stationed nearby for training exercises were performing a roll call. They discovered one soldier was missing and assumed he had been captured by Chinese forces stationed nearby at Wamping Town. The Japanese demanded entry to search the town for the missing soldier. When the Chinese commander refused, the Japanese responded with an attack on the Chinese positions at Marco Polo Bridge along with a nearby railway bridge. This was despite the fact that the missing soldier returned to his unit. He'd just gotten lost in the nearby hills. Aftermath. The skirmish soon escalated, with both sides bringing in reinforcements. Neither the Chinese nor the Japanese central government wanted war, but on-the-ground decisions made by military commanders led to a broader conflict. The Marco Polo Bridge incident gave Japan the pretext to launch a full-scale invasion of China, starting the Second Sino-Japanese War. This war would eventually merge into the broader conflict of World War II. The war was devastating for China, with millions of casualties and widespread destruction. However, it also played a role in ending the Chinese Civil War, as the communists and nationalists temporarily united against the Japanese invasion. This war significantly influenced the political and social landscape of East Asia and set the stage for the eventual establishment of the People's Republic of China. A little bittersweet. Today, the Marco Polo Bridge and the nearby Museum of the War of Chinese People's Resistance Against Japanese Aggression, it's a mouthful, serve as reminders of this significant period in Chinese history. Nifty. 1954. Elvis Presley made his radio debut when WHBQ Memphis played his recording for the first time. The song was "That's All Right, Mama," marking the beginning of Elvis's groundbreaking career in rock and roll. 1978. The Solomon Islands gained independence from the United Kingdom. The islands had been a British protectorate since 1893, and July 7th is now celebrated as Independence Day in the Solomon Islands. What's a protectorate? A protectorate is a state or country that is controlled and protected by a more powerful state. I guess I could have gotten that from context. This can happen for a variety of reasons, including for security, economic interests, or a result of historical circumstances. While the protectorate maintains its formal sovereignty, meaning it retains its distinct legal and governmental systems, it essentially cedes significant control over its foreign policy and sometimes internal affairs to the protector. All right. So essentially it's like, hey, we'll protect you if you let us tell you what to do. The mob can be protectors. 2005. A series of coordinated suicide bomb attacks struck London's public transport system during the morning rush hour known as the 7/7 bombings. The bombings killed 52 people and injured over 700, marking the worst terrorist incident in the United Kingdom since the Lockerbie bombing in 1988. And 2011, the world's newest nation, South Sudan, declared independence from Sudan. The separation came after decades of civil war and a 2011 referendum in which nearly 99% of voters chose independence. Although they didn't want independence enough to change the name. I feel like just come up with a whole new name. I get it, but to close out today, I asked for some quotes about improving oneself, because I'm trying to do that. Sometimes a quote is very cringeworthy, and other times it just clicks. And sometimes you just need to hear that one correct quote to do something good that day, you know? Let's try them. I'm not going to do accents. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Confucius. Do not wait for leaders, do it alone, person to person. Mother Teresa. Become addicted to constant and never-ending self-improvement. Anthony J. D'Angelo. There is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. Ernest Hemingway. I really like that one. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. John F. Kennedy. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's a good one, but, maybe free will doesn't exist. Who knows? I'll talk about that next week. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Nelson Mandela. What was it in? There was something where when they knock you down, you pick yourself back up, something like that. I think it was a movie or show. Probably just a common phrase, I don't know. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. Theodore Roosevelt. This is probably my favorite one. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Aristotle. And it's one I have definitely not developed. But here's hoping we can. Together. All right, I am just way too hot. It's been nice hanging out. Stay classy, everybody. This has been the very first episode of Learnin with Ronpon. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And if nothing else, I hope it passed the time. Make sure to check me out on YouTube at Ronpon. I also live stream while I record these things, and I do that on Twitch at @the_Ronpon and at Kick at Ronpon. I might just start streaming on YouTube instead of Kick, but I don't know. We're seeing how that works for now. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope I will see you soon, because I want to be making more of these. But until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay learning.